It started like any other morning. A simple woman, Sarah, pulled into a luxury mall parking lot in her old, beat-up sedan. The engine coughed, the paint had faded, and one headlight was held together with tape. She stepped out quietly, wearing no designer brands, no flashy jewelry, just a kind face and worn-out sneakers. But in a world where appearances seem to mean everything, she was about to learn how quickly people judge what they don't understand. Two young men leaning against their sleek, matte black Bugatti watched her with smug grins. Loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, they laughed and threw cruel comments her way. "Hey, Grandma, did you steal that from a junkyard?" one joked. The other snorted, "Or maybe it runs on dreams and broken hopes." Their voices echoed with arrogance, fueled by wealth and the need to impress. Others nearby chuckled, some shook their heads, but no one stepped in. Sarah said nothing. She just gave a small smile, nodded politely, and walked away, carrying her grocery bag like it was made of gold. But what they didn't know was that Sarah wasn't just anyone. Behind that calm look and modest car was a life they couldn't even imagine. And while they stood bragging about their million-dollar ride, Sarah was making a quiet phone call, one that would change everything. Less than an hour later, the sound of heavy metal and grinding gears filled the air. People ran to the parking lot, phones out, recording. And there, rolling in with unstoppable force, was something no one expected to see in the middle of the city, a military-grade tank. The boys' laughter turned to disbelief. Their Bugatti, still parked, still spotless. But not for long. The ground shook as the tank rolled closer, its steel treads grinding against the pavement. People gasped and backed away, not sure if what they were seeing was real. The woman from earlier, Sarah, was now standing a few feet from the Bugatti, completely calm, her arms folded as if she'd just been waiting for this moment. The two men who had mocked her were frozen, their mouths slightly open, unsure whether to run, yell, or try to act cool. Who was this woman? How did she get access to a tank? The questions were flying through the crowd, whispered between phone recordings and stunned stares. But Sarah just stood there, watching the scene unfold like it was all part of a quiet plan. What no one knew was that Sarah had spent years serving in the military. She had commanded missions most people would only hear about in documentaries. When she retired, she chose a simple life. No flash, no bragging, just peace. That old car. It was the last thing her late husband had restored before he passed away. To her, it was priceless. But when she saw the same kind of arrogance and cruelty that once caused pain in places far from home, something in her shifted. She didn't want revenge, just a reminder that dignity can't be measured by money, and that the quietest person in the room often holds the most power. The tank stopped just inches from the luxury car, its engine idling low, heavy and commanding. The crowd held its breath. One of the men stepped forward, trying to joke again, but his voice cracked. Sarah looked at him, not angry, just certain. And then she gave a small nod to someone behind the wheel of the tank. But what happened next, nobody was ready for. The man in the designer jacket raised his voice, trying to regain control of the moment. "This has to be a joke," he said, glancing around, hoping someone would back him up. But no one did. The crowd was too focused, too curious. The tank didn't move another inch, but its presence said everything. Sarah still hadn't spoken. She didn't need to. Her silence made the tension even heavier. From a nearby cafe, a security guard stepped out, radio in hand. He looked at the tank, then at Sarah, confused but not confrontational. "Ma'am, is this yours?" he asked cautiously. Sarah finally turned to him and gave a simple answer. Let's just say it belongs to a friend. Behind the wheel was Maria, a fellow veteran and one of the few people Sarah trusted. She wasn't just there for show, she was ready, but only if needed. The man's friend, quieter now, began to shift uneasily. His phone was still filming, but his hands were shaking. He started whispering, "Maybe we went too far." The joke hadn't aged well, and the crowd wasn't laughing anymore. Instead, phones were aimed at them, recording every awkward glance and every step backward. Inside the crowd, a teenager who'd once been bullied for wearing secondhand clothes watched closely. She whispered to her dad, "Who is she?" And he replied, "Someone they should have never underestimated." What Sarah didn't know was that someone had already called the news. A camera crew was on the way. The story was spreading. Asterisk old woman, luxury car, and a tank in a mall parking lot asterisk. It was going viral. But while the crowd stared at the Bugatti, something else was happening. Across the lot, another figure had arrived, unnoticed by most. Someone from Sarah's past, someone who didn't come for peace. The parking lot was no longer just a quiet space outside a mall. It had turned into the center of something much bigger. People weren't just filming for fun anymore. They were sensing something deeper, a moment that felt like it meant something. And right in the middle of it all stood Sarah, the woman they once ignored, now commanding more attention than the luxury car ever did. The tank's engine hummed low, steady, like a storm waiting to break. The air was thick. Even the wind seemed to pause. But across the lot, unnoticed by most, a black SUV had pulled in. From it stepped a man in a long coat, his eyes locked on Sarah. His name was Reese, a name that hadn't crossed Sarah's path in over a decade. They had once served together. But while she left that world behind, Reese stayed in the shadows, drifting into the darker corners of the system. Last she heard, he was working in private defense, doing things Sarah didn't want to know about. Now he was here, watching, calculating. He moved through the crowd without a word, scanning the scene. His eyes darted from the Bugatti to the tank, then to Sarah. He knew something was happening, and from the way the crowd shifted around her, he could feel the weight of it. The two men who had mocked Sarah were completely out of their depth now. Their confidence had vanished. They kept checking their phones, searching for an escape that wasn't coming. Sarah turned slowly. She hadn't seen Reese yet, but something made her pause. Her expression changed, only slightly, but enough to say that she felt the shift. Then Maria, still inside the tank, spoke through the radio. "Sarah, we've got company." The tension snapped tight. Something big was about to happen. Sarah didn't answer the radio right away. Her eyes had finally caught the familiar figure weaving through the crowd. Reese. Her breath hitched just slightly, not from fear, but from recognition. She had buried that part of her past, the missions gone wrong, the choices that haunted them both. But now, here he was, walking straight toward the storm like he belonged in it. Maria's voice came again, sharper this time. "That's Reese, isn't it? You think he's here to stop us?" "I don't know," Sarah muttered, eyes locked on his. "But he's not the type to show up without a reason." Reese stopped just a few feet away, finally breaking the invisible line between past and present. "You always did know how to make an entrance," he said quietly, his voice calm but unreadable. The crowd didn't notice the undercurrent between them. They were still focused on the Bugatti and the tank. The two men had gone silent, practically hiding behind their expensive machine, hoping this somehow wasn't real. Then Reese leaned in, voice low. "I came here because someone tipped me off. Someone's watching you, Sarah. Not just the cameras. Something bigger." Her eyes narrowed. "You think this is about the car? The tank?" "No," he said. "This whole thing was staged to bring you out." That was the twist she hadn't seen coming. She thought she was in control of the message the moment. But now it seemed like she was the target. Suddenly, across the parking lot, a drone buzzed into view. Small, fast, not just filming. Maria's voice snapped in again, alarmed. "Sarah, that's not civilian tech. That's military grade." Now the game had changed. It wasn't just about the Bugatti, the humiliation, or even Reese. Something far more dangerous had just entered the scene. The drone hovered lower, wearing fast, scanning the scene with eerie precision. The crowd started backing away, unsure if this was part of a stunt or something far more serious. Sarah's instincts kicked in. This wasn't just surveillance. It was a threat. She stepped forward, her voice sharp but steady. "Maria, hit the override. Now." With a hiss of hydraulics, the tank powered up fully. Its sensors locked onto the drone, tracking its erratic movement. The luxury car, forgotten by its owners, now sat directly beneath the drone's path. Reese moved in closer to Sarah, glancing up. "They're watching to see how you react. Don't give them what they want." But it was already too late. The drone suddenly dropped lower, flashing a signal light Sarah recognized from her military days. Not a weapon, asterisk a marker asterisk. Someone somewhere had flagged her location. Maria didn't wait. A quick tap of a control, and the tank fired a non-lethal EMP pulse. The drone sparked in midair and crashed, sizzling against the hood of the Bugatti. The crowd screamed and scattered. Smoke rose. Alarms from nearby cars wailed. The two young men who'd started it all were now crouching behind a bench, pale and speechless. Sarah stepped through the haze, calm but fierce. "You laughed at my car," she said, not looking at them. "But power doesn't always show up in chrome." Reese, still at her side, nodded slowly. "They'll come for you now. You know that, right?" "I've been waiting," Sarah replied. Then came the twist no one saw coming. As the smoke cleared, a second tank, identical to the first, rolled up behind them. Maria didn't bring it, and it wasn't on their side. Sarah's eyes darkened. "So this wasn't about me humiliating them," she whispered. "It was always about drawing me out." The second tank came to a halt, its engine rumbling like distant thunder. The crowd had cleared out entirely now, the parking lot silent except for the low hum of tension in the air. Reese stepped in front of Sarah, his hand moving slowly toward the side of his jacket. "I know that model," he said. "That's not civilian or commercial. That's private contractor tech. Someone sent them, and it wasn't the government." Sarah's jaw tightened. Years of quiet living, working in the background, had just been pulled apart in minutes. She stepped forward slowly, her voice calm. "I don't know who you're working for," she called out. "But you've made your move. Now make a choice. Stand down or find out what you're really up against." For a moment, the second tank stayed still. Then slowly, its hatch opened. Inside wasn't a soldier, but a young woman, barely out of her 20s. Nervous, hands shaking, she looked at Sarah, not with anger, but confusion. I didn't know they were using me to bait you," she said. "They told me it was just a training op." Sarah's expression softened just slightly. She approached slowly and said, "You're not the first to be missiled by power, but you get to choose how this ends." The woman nodded, stepped out, and lowered her eyes. With that, the last of the conflict fizzled out. Reese made a call, Maria powered down the tank, and the once chaotic scene slowly returned to stillness. The Bugatti, cracked, scorched, and now a background prop in a story no one would ever forget. Sarah walked back to her old car, slid into the driver's seat, and started the engine. It sputtered as always, but it ran. And as she pulled away, one thing was clear. Sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest truth.